Are you looking to activate your closed captioning but are not sure how to do it? Let us help you. If you are watching the video on YouTube, click the CC button located on the bottom right of the video. If you wish for your captions to be in another language, you can click the settings button next to the CC and choose subtitles, then auto-translate. This will automatically translate the captions to your language of preference. However, since the video is live, it might not always be completely accurate. If you are watching on Facebook, find the closed captioning button, which is also a CC icon and should be at the bottom right of your video. Then choose the language of your captions. If you are unsuccessful, don't worry, we got you. Email us at tech@creatorhq.org and one of our technicians will get back to you as soon as possible. And remember, you can pause the live at any moment and resume it at your own convenience. The live will remain on our social channels for later viewing. Hope you enjoy our session of Lunch and Learn.
Hello, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for coming to this info session on why your social media needs to be accessible to all. Let's see how to control my slides this way. There we go. So welcome again. I like to introduce myself and to say hello to everyone by using this kind of sort of non-gendered welcome of ladies and gentlemen's. Instead of using ladies and gentlemen. Since I've heard it, even though it's not perfect, I've been using it as a more inclusive way to say hello and to welcome people. So I'm Kelly Braun Johnson. I'm the founder of Completely Inclusive. I'm an autistic and hard of hearing self-advocate. I'm an author and I'm a keynote speaker. And I'm so happy to be here today. I like to first, of course, start by thanking Creator HQ, Numerix, and of course, Matilda and Patrick and all the team behind these, this amazing group of creators and people that come together to have these great lunch and learns and spread the word to more people. And also, just also acknowledging that we're trying as hard as we can to make this as accessible as possible for everyone. So I have captions enabled because I need captions for myself. And so I have them here. And then like the little video at the beginning also showed that you can enable them on Facebook and YouTube, which is really important to me. And before I start with the line acknowledgement, I also want to show, if you're able to see, if I get up enough, I'm wearing my t-shirt that says the future is accessible. And that's kind of the point of what we're trying to accomplish today. So I start all my work as well with a line acknowledgement. And I want to make sure that this is done in a way that's respectful, that makes sense, and shows concrete action towards reconciliation. So I just want to acknowledge that I live and work on what is colonially known as Montreal, is the territory of Geojaga, which is the unceded territory of the Haudenosaunee Confederation and the Ganagahaga. And again, I do this and acknowledge that we're here sharing this land, and that the work that I do doesn't just affect the people that came before me, and also on the shoulders of the people that came before me. But what we're working towards, more inclusive, more accessible world, is also going to impact the future generations. So I'll start with a bit of terminology because, I said we have this talk about accessibility. What does that even mean? And a lot of times we'll ask people and people will have different ideas about what inclusion and what accessibility really means. So I went and I found the two, I guess, standard or Canadian versions. I want to make sure this is relevant, for what we're talking about here in Canada. And The definition I found from Global Inclusion Canada was inclusion is fair, equitable, supportive, welcoming, and respectful. So it's kind of any place where you feel those things. And I just kind of want to note that it says equitable and not equal. And that's really important, especially going forward. And what I'm going to talk about today is that making things accessible is not really about equality so much as giving the person is precisely what they need. And sometimes that means equity rather than equality. And then the second word that we're throwing around a lot is accessibility. And this came from the Accessible Canada Act. And it says creating communities, workplaces, and services that enable everyone to participate fully in society without barriers. So that's really what we're doing. We're breaking down barriers. We're trying to make life easier for everyone. So I just want you to take a moment, though, and look at these two definitions and the words that they're using, and notice that a lot of times, we equate accessibility with disability, but neither of these definitions actually have the word disability in them. And so I think part of the point and part of the way that I approach all my work is that we're not just designing things for disabled people, even though, yes, that's valid and good, and we should. I think it shows that these aspects of support, of community, of a society that doesn't have barriers, that's respectful, that really goes for everyone. So when we're talking about accessibility today and implementing it in your social media, it's not just for one specific type of people or person. It's really about making it easier for everyone. And I just want you to keep that in mind going forward. So we are going to talk about disability a bit because it is still relevant. And I want to talk about the reality and the statistics. So we're going to go into some numbers here, but I want to keep it real in terms of what we're actually dealing with in society today. So almost 25% of the Canadian population has a disability of some sort. And I say this stat and then people go, okay, well, what exactly does that mean? So this means that on the Canadian census that we have every 4 years, people have declared some sort of disability. And in Canada, that is pretty much any issue or condition that you can have that can be lifelong or episodic. It can be acquired later in life, or you can be born with it. It can be visible or invisible. But any sort of issue that prevents you or limits your functions and kind of prevents you from doing the things of everyday life that you would like to do in everyday fashion. So this includes things like chronic pain, people who suffer from chronic migraines, fibromyalgia, I can't even say it properly. But the most common disability in Canada is actually mobility. It's actually pain and mobility. So people who have, let's say, just lower back problems. And I say just, I don't really mean to minimize it, but we don't usually think of those issues as being a disability. A lot of people will have certain mobility issues like arthritis or some pain, and they don't necessarily identify with the disability community. But we don't really make a distinction. In the end, if it is limiting aspects of your life, if it's causing you pain, if it's causing you some sort of distress, if you have problems with access, going shopping or things like that, it's going to affect you. And whether or not people can see it or not, and whether or not it was like as a result of an accident and it happened later in life, it's still considered a disability. Now, the next stat is unfortunately a lot more sobering. 1 in 4 Canadians will have a mental health issue at some point in their lifetime. And this is kind of scary in the sense that when I started this work 4 years ago, when I started my consultancy, I had this stat of 1 in 8 Canadians. And this new one of 1 in 4, the number has risen because of the pandemic. So during this 2 years of the pandemic, it has really strongly affected all of the Canadian population. It's something that has hurt us all in some ways. And so if you know that 1 in 4 people are currently struggling right now, have struggled in the past, or will be struggling, and with such a small ratio, that means if it's not you, it's somebody else that somebody in your family, somebody amongst your friends. So I think we always kind of need to be aware that there's always going to be somebody struggling. Anytime you're walking down the street, somebody is probably struggling with some sort of issue that you can't necessarily see. And so again, keep that in mind, because as we're looking at social media, as we're using our social media as a way to talk to people, to communicate, to build community, to sell things, to understand where the other person is coming from, and that they might need things that are different from what you might need. Now, despite all of that, disabled people still love to live life, have an active lifestyle, and they represent a purchasing power worth a whopping $55 billion annually. Disabled people still go out and shop and buy things and buy nice clothes and go on vacations, buy houses, buy cars, and even to the point where a lot of the times we have to go and buy even more expensive products or adapted products that cost more than regular products. And even to the point where, a lot of times people make fun of products that they see in the store, let's say like a fruit that's already cut up, and they go, well, why would anybody need to have their orange peeled or something like that? These things come at a premium. They cost more. But for people who have things like arthritis or some sort of mobility issue, which again is super common, they need those products. They need to have things presented in a way, things that are already cut up for them, and it costs more. So this idea, I think a lot of times we have this idea that disabled people are kind of hiding away and not able to buy things, and they're not worth your time to sell to them. That's really the furthest thing from the truth. It's not the case at all. I still want to acknowledge that, yes, we have typically higher unemployment rates, but there's other ways, and there's other social supports, and usually families that come together to support people. So also remember that when you're marketing to a disabled person, you're not just marketing to them, you're marketing to their whole family, because the whole support network of people that are engaged with that person in their care, in their active lifestyle, are also going to be affected by those things. Now, we can talk a bit about screen readers. And screen readers are not just for blind or low vision. And so just a brief description of what a screen reader is, or what it does, is it will read out the text that's on a screen. And so it works on cell phones, it works on laptops and any computer. And typically, people who rely on screen readers on a regular basis actually don't listen to them at regular speed. They listen to them extremely quickly. So often I saw somebody had a poll recently that most people will listen to their podcast at 1.25 or 1.5 speed. And usually that's about the max. Whereas people who use screen readers on a regular basis, they're so used to them, and they're so used to the prompts and just listening to language that fast. It's like 10 times faster. And that's because it's efficient for them. They're used to it. That's how they work. And I want you to keep these things in mind, because the way that people use technology, it might not be the idea or the perception that you have about how they're using it. And so when we're talking about making things accessible for social media, it's really important to understand why or how the people that you're trying to engage are using the technology, and then kind of work with that. Take their advice. This is the beginning, like this kind of workshop here, to give you some insight into how people actually use it, And that way you can then tailor your message and your communication and your social media to be accessible in a way that works for the people who actually use it. But it's not just blind or low vision people who use it. Lots of people who are fully sighted still use screen readers or other types of assistive technology. So let's take a look at some of these people. So people who are dyslexic often, rather than trying to read, because it's just more taxing, it's not that they can't read, it's just that it takes a bit longer, will often use screen readers. You might be surprised that people with ADHD can benefit from screen readers. So this can help with their focus, it can help with their processing, or it could be even that they're listening to content from your website or even from social media while they're doing something else. And this is a way that they can keep their brain engaged. So they're actually doing two things at once, but it's the way that they're getting your message, despite the fact it might look like they're not paying attention. But they can consume media in different ways. And again, we're talking about brain injuries, a stroke, a concussion, a traumatic brain injury, which again can happen as a result of accident. Doesn't mean you were born that way, but you might benefit from screen readers, again, so that you're not always looking at the screen. Sometimes the light of the screen can be very oppressive. It can cause headaches. That blue light can be very overstimulating for people. There's all sorts of other different issues with why somebody might not want to look directly at a screen and have it read to them. Chronic pain, again, this can just be with navigating the web, not wanting to kind of type or use their fingers a lot. They can just press a couple of hotkeys. It's going to read to them, and it can go and skip to the next post or the next line without them having to touch, a mouse or anything like that, or even just the dexterity that's needed sometimes just to type on your phone. They might just have things automatically reading and moving along to the next image or the next piece of text. And again, similar things with muscle weakness, carpal tunnel, or even a temporary injury. If you've ever broken your wrist or a finger or something like that, or your arm, and you weren't able to type with two hands, you might have started using hotkeys and different parts of technology that's already there. It's already free and it's built in to a lot of software already, or even a lot of hardware. So sometimes it takes something like an accident before you start to realize that you can actually benefit from a lot of these things that are actually already built in to a lot of our products that we already use. So of course, I need a drink too for lunch and learn time. So before we jump into a lot of the other reasons, there's a really basic thing, and that's why I'm talking about it, inclusion and accessibility, is because people buy from people they trust. That's hands down, that's the first part of marketing, right? You have to earn a relationship with these people, find out what makes them tick, find out their pain points, and they have to trust you. They have to like you, at least a little bit usually. And that's something that's really important, especially with younger generations now, where they're already much more socially conscious, socially aware. They're aware of their impact. They're aware that they have buying power and they have choices. So they're going to go to people that have and reflect their values, their shared culture. This is super important to them. And so they're looking to your social media account to see, okay, does this person get me? Do they value me? Do they want me as a customer? Do they speak my language? Are they communicating with me in a way that includes me, that I feel welcome, that I feel that I can go to their store and use their products and I'm going to be valued? This is really, really important. And we also know that, of course, representation matters. When they see people who look like them either in the stores, on your media, they shouldn't just see pictures of the same kind of type of people all the time. If they can see themselves reflected in it, and they see other people who look like them using the product or service, this lends a great deal of credibility. And so this is super important when we're talking about accessibility and inclusion. It's not even just a disability thing. It's about people being able to relate to you and share your values and trust you. And you have to speak to them in a way that makes sense to them. So of course, everything in marketing comes down to customer experience, right? The whole process of your marketing, we have to think all the time of customer experience. And so again, there's the shared values, there's that. But I do want to bring in this little piece of legal compliance. So it's important that we're not going to discriminate against people. You still have to have a niche and a market, and understand that your product or your service is not for everyone. That's fine, but it's really important not to exclude people at the same time. Let customers decide for themselves where they're going to buy, but don't actively go ahead and exclude them or discriminate them, right? But there's also what's especially coming forward more now is there's an aspect of legal compliance. So in Canada, we don't have the same thing as the ADA in the US. That's the American with Disabilities Act. They have laws about things like not just physical accessibility, but web accessibility. So your website has to be compliant. It has to fit certain standards and it has to be accessible. There's been great, huge lawsuits against major companies for millions of dollars because their website wasn't accessible. Beyonce was one of the people that got sued because her people couldn't buy tickets off her website in an accessible way. And there's just so many. So in Canada, we don't have that legal aspect quite yet in the same way. We do have provincial regulations, though. Ontario is one of the provinces that has the strongest, I'd say, provincial regulation when it comes to digital accessibility. And they have very strong deadlines of when all business have to be compliant. But again, this is with websites. It's not on social media yet, but I think keep it in mind because it will probably be coming. And you being a Canadian selling, if let's say you're selling products into the US market, I think you should be mindful of this because you can still get sued. And even if social media doesn't quite have the same enforcement, I guess, as websites have so far, I believe that it's still going to be an issue. And that again, people are judging. They're judging by, again, do you have the shared values? Are you saying, are you walking the walk? Are you talking the talk? If your website's accessible, but then your social media is not, they're going to see a disconnect, right? Or vice versa. So people are really scrutinizing businesses, I'd say right now. And it's important that your customer experience and your values are represented more uniformly throughout all the media and marketing that you put out. And so just to try to be aware of that. And when we just if we're just looking at money, I mean, I don't like to see, people as profits. That's not the kind of way that I like to think. But if any other step in your sales funnel was broken, you would try and find the way to fix it, right? If you see that people are, loading the shopping cart, and then you see that, oh, they removed this item. Why did they remove that particular item? Or why didn't they complete the purchase? We have tons of software that follows people's sales journey, and we can see along the way where people dropped off, right? Even if your email funnel, let's say, this email worked, people clicked on this part, and then they stopped clicking. So when we're trying to understand where the breakage is, one aspect might actually be the accessibility, to the point that maybe they filled the shopping cart, they were able to do that, the site worked for that, and then they got to a certain part and the pay now button, for whatever reason, wasn't accessible to them, or they couldn't see it, so they couldn't buy. And imagine if it was just that. Like, imagine if they were already interested in buying, they're already been sold, like they're ready to go, and then the last thing, and they can't complete the funnel, they can't complete the cycle. So I think again, it's not only about money, but let's look at the whole customer experience, and let's look at making sure that your customer is happy and able to do what they want to do on your site or through your social media, and able to engage in the way that you need them to in order for them to complete the sales cycle. So one way that we can be more inclusive and accessible, I'm going to argue for both. I'm going to argue for both all the time because, like I said, one thing that's good for one person is usually good for others. Is to watch their language. You can watch your language in your marketing, and that's super easy. So also, it's really important too. Let's not have very complicated language where you're using big terms and you're not speaking in a way that again is really, if it's too highfalutin and people can't understand what you're trying to say or what you're trying to sell, that's not going to be useful either. And that's not to say that we're going to talk down to people or anything like that, but try to keep your message at a level that is really accessible to everyone so that you can reach a broad range of your audience. And then there's words that are kind of more gendered that can be offensive, that we want to kind of try and stay away from because it's ostracizing to certain groups of people. So like you saw at the beginning, I welcomed people by saying thadies and gentlethems, you know, and I've gone on many YouTube channels where I see people say, hey guys, or hey bro, you know, I'm not a guy and I'm not a bro, I'm not a dude, right? I mean, I don't really mind dudes so much, but if you can try to avoid some of those kind of gendered languages, and some people will say, oh, well, you know, you're just oversensitive. And I'd say, you know what? Even if it's a matter of, let's say, some people being oversensitive, there's enough oversensitive people. Do you want to ostracize that whole group? Because there's a lot of them, right? If you know, you can't. I don't think you can kind of like put oversensitive people in some sort of corner somewhere and say, well, I'm not going to bother with those. Your sales might actually come from a lot of oversensitive people over time, especially as we become more perhaps oversensitive. Again, I don't like that word. That's not the way that I go about it. I look at it at if I'm potentially hurting somebody or potentially excluding someone with my language, I want to fix that. I want to know, and I want to do what I can. And I don't particularly care about what the reasons are. My only worry is, did I hurt somebody today? And if I can do something to not hurt somebody today, I'm going to do everything in my power to not hurt someone. Because in the end, I just want to be kind. That's all. And so it doesn't have to be more complicated than that. That's on brand for me, right? That's authentic to me. And so I do things that are on brand for me. And that's to me the best, that how your business, when you're marketing it, you've got to be on brand. If your brand is harsh, let's say, and like maybe you start by insulting people, which, you know, I've seen many restaurants like this, right? You see a restaurant, you go there and they insult you, they yell at you when you sit down. Some people like that experience, and that's that brand. But if that's not your brand and you want to be inclusive and accessible to more people, then you're not going to do it that way. And there's other words that we can also avoid. Things like crazy, insane. You know, these are terms that are typically used and stigmatizing towards people who have mental health conditions. And to some extent, those people are reclaiming some of the terminology, and now they're calling themselves mad, which is fine. And that's, if that's what they want to do, that's their choice. But calling things like, say, oh, that's so OCD when you don't have OCD, or crazy or insane or idiot or lame, like these are all things that are really like ableist and just not cool. And it probably, I'm going to guess, probably doesn't really have a place in your business plan. So there's lots of alternatives though that we can use, right? We can say, hey folks, friends, teams, coworkers, partners, ambassadors, influencers, lovely humans, or the person's name, if you have that information. But there's different ways, and maybe you can come up with your own that fits with your brand. Like Benedict Cumberbatch had the Cumber cookies, and Lady Gaga has her monsters, right? So there's different things that you can do that you can kind of make it your own, but make it inclusive. Now, this is my big thing. Always add captions. So there's a couple reasons, though, for always adding captions to your videos. And it's not just because of people who are deaf and hard of hearing like me, but we know statistically right now, most people, especially when they're in public or in a professional setting, are browsing their social media with the volume off or low. So if the image and the video doesn't attract them, if there's words that are important that would make the video, interactive or funny or help people understand it, those need to be captioned, because what's going to happen is, let's say they're on the bus and they're scrolling and they go, oh, that video was interesting. But then there's no context because they couldn't hear words that were perhaps important to the context of the video. They're going to skip it. And they're not going to go back. And they're not going to go back and try and find it later. So you've just lost an opportunity, especially if you spent a lot of time and money into making your videos. Let's not then kind of squander it by leaving your message behind, right? That kind of ruins the impact. So if you want people to convert, they have to understand your message and what you're saying. And just me, like I said, I'm hard of hearing. I will totally skip a video if it has no captions. I don't care. I don't care what brand it is. I don't care how much I like your product. Actually, I probably won't like your product very much if it doesn't cater to me, or if it doesn't, if it doesn't market to me in a way that I can understand. And part of understanding means I have to actually hear it. And so if I can't hear your message, I can't buy. Like it's as simple as that. It's the same way where I don't listen to podcasts unless they have a transcript. I read the transcript. And so there's a whole part of the world that is missing if you're not engaging people in ways that works for them. Let me see if I have a bit of time. Okay, wait, I'll go back one just because I just want to make sure. Okay, let me just take my questions for a minute before I go. Let me see. Okay. So I wanted to just kind of also add, things like image descriptions and alt text. I'm not going to go into how we do that here. I mean, this was the why. This is the why it's important. If you want to know the how, I have a whole e-course devoted on how to make your social media accessible. But I just wanted to express the importance of having things like image descriptions, because people who are low vision or people who are even colorblind won't see your full message in just the image or the colors, right? But it's still important to put those details in. Don't just say something like image of a cow in a field. Because when I say that, like just now, when I said image of a cow in a field, I don't know how many people are watching right now, but let's say 20 people will have 20 different ideas of what an image of a cow in a field is, right? Somebody's going to have blue skies. Somebody's going to have, a cow in the rain. Somebody's going to have a green pasture. Somebody's going to have dirt. Like, who knows? Cow could be brown. The cow could be black or white. We don't know. So that doesn't give people the information. But I've had people question, why add things like color or description in the image description? And they go, well, if the person's blind, then they can't see. But the case with blindness, for example, just blindness, if we're talking about vision loss, that is actually the most common acquired disability. So, our eyes are super sensitive and super not protected. And so a lot of people will have accidents later in life where, they'll hurt their eye, they'll lose their vision, and then they'll suddenly need to have things like image descriptions and screen readers. And they know what color looks like. They know because they lived it, they experienced it. So they have a concept of color. And most people who are blind actually are not 100% totally blind. They have some aspects. They can see some light. Sometimes they can see some color still. And again, like I said, because especially vision loss is one of the most common acquired disabilities, people will often need glasses later in their life, things like that. They still have a concept of colors and textures and the description. If you describe a particular flower, they're going to know what that looks like. And so it's important to still put those aspects in. Like, don't make assumptions about what a person might need. I'd always rather put more information in than less. Yeah, and that's really what I was talking about at the beginning, where I was saying, try to make sure that you're communicating for your audience without really assuming what they might need. Do it in a way that's authentic to your brand, but do it in a really open and inclusive sort of way. And that's really how you make things as accessible as possible. So once again, thank you so much for coming. I hope you've learned a lot in a short time. It's unfortunate that this subject is so huge. There's so much information that I'd love to give. Again, if you want more, I'm open to questions right now. You can always contact me. I'm an open book. You can check out my social media and see how I do it. Or you're welcome to try out the e-course that I have up on how to make your social media accessible. So let's see if there are any questions. So I can read out some of them as well. It says, thank you so much. Thanks for the inclusivity. My name is Jack with he, they pronouns. Fantastic. Thank you for introducing yourself. If there aren't any other questions, I'm always happy to take questions by email. You can message me on Instagram. I'm on Facebook under Completely Inclusive. And I hope that we'll see some great change in the world.